Serving it up to you live on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network. I'm Bruce Nolan, that's Nate Geary, and this is Food for Thought. Tonight's topic du jour, projections. It's projections that you're doing when you kind of project your own insecurities on your friends and family. Not that kind of projection. Instead, Buffalo Bills projections. The far more healthy, I would say, of the projections. Mr. Geary, how you doing, dude?
Good evening, Mr. Nolan. I can't wait to tell you about the meal I just had.
Well, you know what? Let's just dive in.
All right.
The hors d'oeuvres for tonight on the topically appropriate Food for Thought, the best meal of your life. Hit me in the comments. Tell me what the best meal of your life was, while Nate serenades me with what he tells me is the best meal of his life that he just... Recency bias be darned, he says. Best meal of his life just happened. Nate, hit me.
Can you see how tired I look? Luckily, I had my guy give me a French press coffee in which I drank the whole thing just to give me enough energy to overcome the level of full that I am right now, which is just a level of full. That is just a level of satisfaction that I haven't quite felt in some time and or ever in my life. So if you know anything about me, you know I'm a big the restaurant in Buffalo here locally called Tout Tant. It's one of the greatest restaurants in Buffalo. It is a Cajun-style Louisiana take on fried chicken and everything else. Chef James Roberts, the owner of Tout Tant, also owns a little number down the street called Dubutsu, and it's a take on like fresh catch fish, right? So lots of great seafood dishes. I had lobster ramen.
Oh,
grilled lobster ramen, and I don't like lobster.
Really?
And it was one of the best dishes I've ever had outside of like one of his dishes at Tout Tant. Like his Nashville chicken at Tout Tant's the best dish I've ever had. This is the second best dish, but they're both by the same chef, so it's technically allowed to say I'm allowed to say it's the best dish. But chef, like totally. So it's my girlfriend's birthday. Happy birthday, Leanna. She does not listen to our podcast, by the way. This is not her cup of tea. Food for thought, which is fine. You know, she'd rather listen to. She'd rather watch, some crazy show on whatever have you on Netflix. That's fine. She can do her. While she gets to take an hour away from dealing with me. Bruce, you get to babysit me. But I'm just going to tell you that if you have not been to Dubutsu downtown on Seneca Street, 500 Seneca, it's one of the best dining experiences you'll ever have. They have one of the best selections of bourbon that I've ever come across. Overall, one of the best dining experiences I've ever had. There was 3 desserts. I will be sharing all of these photos later on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter at Nate Sports. So make sure you're following me because I'm going to post all these pictures. It was just one of the best experiences I've ever had. The lobster ramen. Well, what's your take on lobster, Bruce?
So I am going to skip over. I'm going to pass on the opportunity to talk about the best meal of my life.
Okay.
To tell you a story about lobster. And in my family, occasionally I will still be referred to as Lobster Boy because of this particular story I'm going to tell you. So when I was much younger, we were having a celebratory dinner with my family and a large group of people. And we went out to this nice restaurant in the area that we were living at the time. And I was sitting far away from my father at the table. And I had never really been to a restaurant quite like this before because there was a section of the menu that did not have prices on it. Instead, it just said
market rate. Yes.
Right. So I was not familiar with this concept. So I lean over to my brother at the time and I say, hey, what does this mean? He goes, well, it's just the same as everything else. So when the waiter comes around, I ordered the lobster tail, not knowing how much the lobster tail was going to cost. So my uncle, who was sitting across from me, had a conversation and said, hey, did you order the lobster tail? I said, yeah, it said market price, but my brother told me it was pretty much going to be the same as everything else. And he looked at me and he goes, oh no, that's not what this
That's not what I said.
What that means is a variable pricing. And I grabbed the waiter as he came by again. I said, I'm so sorry. What did I just order? He goes, well, this is Brazilian lobster tail. It was flown in this morning.
It's flown in.
We have 2 of them. And I said, oh, no. Oh, no. Something's gone horribly wrong. Something has gone horribly wrong. And I immediately tried to get my father's attention to tell him what I had done.
Sorry.
Because I was afraid he was going to get a fat bill and look at it and go, what has my son done? So I was desperately trying to get his attention. My father, of course, had already known what was going on and decided to troll me by saying, you know what? No, it's fine. We can talk after the bill. I said, no, Dad, we got to talk now. We cannot talk before the bill. We absolutely cannot. I had the lobster tail brought out to me, and it was, of course, an extremely extravagant presentation of this lobster tail. And I was sitting here going, I don't care what it costs me. I will eat every single morsel of this lobster tail, lest anything be wasted. And my father, to this day, gets a great bit of joy out of calling me Lobster Boy associated with that. In fact, he listens to this show. So he's probably listening right now going, oh yeah, I remember that story.
I remember.
Yes, it was an ultimate Mr. Nolan troll that was laid out at the feet of Bruce Nolan. So now that we've gotten the hors d'oeuvres out of the way, let's move on to the appetizers. The Bills roster overview is upon us.
Yeah.
Because it's been set. And I think that there weren't a lot of surprises. There were a lot of pretty much same old, what we had expected. You and I had outlined a couple different options for 53-man roster projections last Friday on Food for Thought. And a lot of them came true the way that we thought they were going to. A couple of them didn't. Nate, what was your biggest surprise now that the roster, the practice squad, and injured reserve have been set?
Daryl Johnson being traded. Did not see that coming. I definitely felt that after I heard Brandon Beane talk that there was going to be a trade of some sort. I just did not imagine the guy being traded was Daryl Johnson. I almost thought Bam Johnson is probably the only guy that's maybe untouchable out of that entire group, just based on his ability on special teams, the rawness still in his game. I thought for sure Bam Johnson was safe. 2 tight ends, and one of them being Tommy Sweeney. Did not have that in my Food for Thought predictions. Short of that, I think everything else was pretty kosher. I think we all knew Reggie Gilliam was going to find a way onto this 53-man roster. I got to say the biggest surprise outside of Bam Johnson being traded has got to be that Jacob Hollister is still currently to this day a street free agent. Has not been picked up on a practice squad. And they're
just
going
got
with
signed
Tommy
by the
Sweeney.
Jaguars, actually.
Well,
just got signed by the Jaguars.
Not the Bills practice squad,
yes,
I should say.
While you were
I've got to say I'm surprised about Tommy Sweeney. I'm surprised.
I'm surprised a little bit about Tommy Sweeney, too, because I feel like there was this strange groundswell of support for Tommy Sweeney, not just because he has a luscious and magnificent
Brandon
mustache.
Riley level fan support. Yeah.
But also because if you remember correctly, there was a certain amount of time that occurred at the beginning of Tommy Sweeney's rookie year where he was the only real healthy tight end on the roster.
Yeah.
And he got a ton of reps in a preseason game, and the Bills were like, yeah, we're happy with what the projection, and the Tommy Sweeney hype train sort of took off. Then the myocarditis kicked in, and he missed the year because of this. And then he comes in, he hurts his foot, he ends up being a walking boot. We thought, no way. There just isn't enough statistically significant sample size for Tommy Sweeney to make this team. I think I had Jacob Hollister being cut. But remember, I had him being cut to wait in the parking lot and come back.
Right.
He waited in the parking lot. No one ever came for him. He's still in the parking lot. In the rain with sad music playing in the background, waiting for Brandon Beane.
Sad trombone. Yeah, sad trombone.
Somewhere he's looking out the window waiting for Brandon Beane to roll down his driveway in a car and come out with a trench coat holding a boombox above his head saying, come on down. We've got another contract for you. And that isn't what happened. I think that clearly is the biggest surprise for me.
Yeah.
I obviously picked Josh Thomas over DeMar Hamlin to be the 4th safety spot, but that could have gone either way. So just because that got flipped, wasn't overly shocked by that. It went
in the direction, by the way, of Jay Skursky and myself, who had DeMar Hamlin on the 53-man roster. I don't want to say that Jay and I are superior men, but here we are.
I mean, you really don't have to. Really, I mean, it just kind of comes with the territory. In the comments, we have Brian Freedom with the take, says Taiwan Jones will see the field more than Matt Breida. Okay, so I don't actually hate this take, and I'll tell you why.
It's a bad take.
Taiwan Jones, I think, will be active on every single game day, and I don't necessarily know that Matt Breida will be. So I don't think this is a terrible take, because if you look at the 5 players that you think need to be inactive every single week, assuming they dress the amount of offensive linemen they need to be able to make that number 5, you look at 5 and you go, okay, maybe a safety, maybe a defensive tackle, probably a running back, and it's not going to be Taiwan Jones because he plays on special teams, so maybe Matt Breida there, and maybe a tight end or Reggie Gilliam, depending on packages, and Tommy Doyle. So for me, I don't think this is a crazy take, having Taiwan Jones seeing the field more than Matt Breida.
I got a hot take.
I'm ready.
I would argue that one of the other 2 running backs, Singletary or Moss, end up inactive more times than Matt Breida is.
Wow. You know, I feel like we should make a bet on that. I feel like
I'm comfortable with that.
On this.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. All right. We're going to make a bet. We'll think about it. We'll mull it around. We're going to come back. We'll make a bet. We'll come back. We'll do it. It'll be fantastic. Dead Level Best says, at the beginning of camp, would you have been surprised to see Kumaro make the 53? Yes. At the beginning
of camp?
Yeah. You?
I'm trying to remember how I felt at the beginning of camp. Yeah, probably surprised. I did get the sense that after last year, after how the end of the year went, they went out and they got Kumaro back off of New Orleans practice squad. I felt all along that there was a level of they really liked Kumaro, and then Kumaro had the camp he had. And I think it made it a no-brainer for them. So if you were asking me how I felt on day 1 of training camp, if you told me the first day of training camp, Kumaro would make the 53-man roster and I'd be surprised by it, yeah, I'd probably say that. But like a week in, Bruce? Like a week in, I think it was pretty obvious that this guy was going to be pushing for the 53-man roster over Isaiah Hodgins, who I think everyone was sort of fixated on as the guy that will be the 6th receiver. And I think our set was thrown off quite a bit. Almost as soon as that first week was over, it was very clear Jay Kumaro was the 6th best receiver on this team. And arguably, you could talk about role and where he potentially fits, and you can make the argument he might be this team's number 5 receiver. So yeah, I guess I would say if I were to rewind and remember where I was the first day of training camp and who I believed would be this team's number 6 wide receiver, I would have told you all day, every day, it's Isaiah Hodgins. They spent a draft pick on him. This team likes to keep guys around that they've spent draft picks on. Even then, they could not ignore the training camp that Jake Kumaro had. And you ask anybody that covers the team that is that's at training camp practice, Matt Perino, Sal Capaccio. 2 weeks ago, we had on Jay Skursky, the Buffalo News. Each and every one of them kept saying the name Jay Kumaro. And I think ultimately the guy that kept showing out at practice each and every day was creating that rapport with Josh Allen, won the job. I am not surprised today, but I probably would have been surprised after day 1 of training camp. Yeah.
One of the things that I think is an interesting thing to take away from the Kumaro, Isaiah Hodgins thing is simply how significant the gap is between spring practices for a wide receiver and training camp for a wide receiver, because we've seen this before. And if you look across the NFL and if you follow other beat reporters, you will see this as a trend. There are plenty of wide receivers across the NFL who are able to make splashes in spring practices and don't have that
never carry it over.
Never carry over. It does not translate over into training camp. And a lot of that's because of contact. They can't get off the line.
That's right.
And a lot of that, obviously, the ghosts of Des Lewis still hang deep over me. When Desmond Lewis was going to be a player who was lighting it up in spring practices.
The Rick Rodgers
simply couldn't get off press. It was a big part of making that transition from spring practices to training camp, and it simply didn't happen. Nate, do you have a player you wish would have stuck around? Because I do. Obviously, the obvious answer is Jacob Hollister. Jacob Hollister is obviously a person that I wish would have stuck around. The biggest thing for me that as far as I wish they would have stuck around is Cam Lewis. And not necessarily because I think Cam Lewis is a special or unique talent, and he is on the practice squad. I don't like having 5 corners on the roster. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. If you go 4 wide, you have 1 player margin for error, 1 for an injury. How many times have we seen this regime dress 4 or 5 corners in a game, have one of them get banged up, and all of a sudden Micah Hyde's playing the slot? It's just an active decision that they make game in and game out that just cuts a little bit close for me. It's a little bit risky. So not because I think Cam Lewis is a transcendent talent, I simply don't like carrying 5 corners. It broke my heart to project it, and I was hoping I was going to be wrong, and unfortunately I wasn't. Nate, do you have a player you wish would have stuck around?
Yeah, I think I've got one, and I'm going to stick at the position, but I'm not going to say the same guy. I'm going to say Nick McLeod. Nick McLeod, if you guys might tell, I'm a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan. Nick McLeod at the University of Notre Dame was a solid but not spectacular type of player. I thought he earned reps with the second team in training camp. From everything we heard veteran players talking about Nick McLeod in the first 2 weeks of training camp, which is not a thing that you do about rookies that are more than likely going to be practice squad level players. They cut him. He's the only player that was picked up off waivers on this team that is now on an active roster. That's Nick McLeod over at Cincinnati. I think if I'm saying one player, it's Nick McLeod.
I was not expecting that. I know Nick McLeod is somebody who frequently showed up in the observations of beat reporters who were there, the aforementioned Matt Perino, Sal Capaccio, and so on and so forth. But I think we can both agree that cornerback is a part of this team that, wishes it had more depth. But looking around the league, I don't know if you've took a peek at all at the Arizona Cardinals depth chart at corner.
It's bad.
It is not great, Bob.
It's bad.
So you know what? It could be worse. Levi Wallace is an upgradable starter, but he's also a serviceable starter.
Yeah.
I think Taron Johnson is an upgradable nickel corner, but he's completely serviceable. When you look at the Arizona Cardinals, you think to yourself, okay, they put their money this offseason into acquiring J.J. Watt and A.J. Green, and those corners are not looking like they might be able to cover someone. Kyler Murray might need to be an MVP caliber player in order for the Cardinals to have an above 500 season, just due to the fact that they might not be able to cover anybody. Moving along, this is something that you and I wanted to talk about a couple weeks ago, and we just never got there. And that is Devin Singletary RB1. So aside from the whole Devin Singletary picture of him at the gym flexing, looking jacked as all get out, making its way around the viral interwebs, aside from that, Devin Singletary had a really good preseason. Multiple people were overly impressed with the way he played this preseason. When you consider the fact that Zach Moss found himself again hampered by a different injury, this time a hamstring, although he did show out pretty well against the Bears, although he had a few of his bigger runs called back. Devin Singletary is listed as the starting running back. But as far as carries go, we're going to get into this a little bit with Evan Silva. I got into this a little bit on the Bruce exclusive this past week with Greg Thompson. Devin Singletary is going as an average draft position in fantasy. He's going behind Zach Moss. People are taking Zach Moss first. People in the NFL community think Zach Moss is the dude. But Devin Singletary is listed as the dude. We all know that workhorses aren't part of the DNA for the Buffalo Bills. We know this.
No.
Not part of the DMA. But could it be approaching 60, 40, 70, 30 kind of stuff for Devin Singletary this year? Nate, what do you think? Is he RB1?
Yeah, I'm excited to get Evan Silva on here to talk a little bit more about this, because I have found that Zach Moss is almost universally propped up more than anyone else in this backfield. He's almost universally the darling of everyone that talks fantasy football. I think it's Devin Singletary. I think he showed out. I think he outplayed Zach Moss during training camp and in the preseason action, the limited preseason action. I think anytime you're in the facility for this organization and you show out during the summer and you're a guy that's in the weight room at the facility doing things in the offseason that make coaches notice, there's something about that stands out to this coaching staff, and they reward those sorts of things. So for me, I think Devin Singletary is the guy that, listen, at the end of the day, we could be talking about semantics here, Bruce. We could be talking about a guy that ends up essentially getting 40% of the workload. I think Zach Moss, you're looking at 35-40% of the workload. And I do believe Matt Breida has a role in all of this. The reason is he's the only back in this backfield that offers some sort of varied skilled set. This is a guy that has that top end speed, can produce in the passing game, which I think both of these guys, maybe Zach Moss is the guy in the passing game that brings a little bit more than Devin Singletary. But I've got to say, Bruce, I've been underwhelmed by Zach Moss almost since the day he's walked in the door. I guess I don't really see the hype that everybody keeps pumping home. I haven't seen it.
I really wonder if the hype is analytically based from the fact that Zach Moss got infinitely more goal line touches, and they're thinking, okay, let's put this together. So if Zach Moss got more goal line touches and they just gave Josh Allen a $250 million, who's going to get that touchdown upside? And that's going to be Zach Moss. When you combine that with the fact that his ADP is, 9th, 10th round in a lot of leagues, that's an opportunity for upside. And so I wonder if it's not really about skill set, if it's not really about the fact that he's special in any sort of way. It's simply about opportunity, and it's about scoring opportunity, specifically with the idea that maybe the Bills aren't going to run Josh Allen as much this year. Yeah. I'll level with you. I think they are. I think the Bills are going to do all the same things with Josh Allen this year than they did with last year. I really don't think that the fact that he just signed a $258 million contract is going to change what the Bills do with Josh Allen. It's part of what makes him difficult to defend. It's part of what makes him a dynamic player. I don't think you're going to see Josh Allen all of a sudden morph into a guy who's going to slide short of the first down on third down. I just don't think it's going to happen. And I don't think the coaches are going to tell him that. They have consistently talked about making sure that Josh Allen is being himself.
Yeah.
And he's being the type of player that got him MVP votes. So moving along, we have a mailbag. We have a mailbag question from Trevor. And Trevor sent me an email. He said, "Good afternoon, Mr. Nolan. I hope your summer days are going well and you're enjoying all the camp news headed up to the 2021 regular season. I've had this question for some time, but I've pushed off asking for whatever reason. And now it's out of season, but I can't seem to shake it anyway. At what point do we as an organization, in terms of draft picks, start to draft players that are more of a sure thing than drafting projects with insanely high upsides, but that will require a lot of development? I know our aggressive drafts and developed draft style has led us to arguably the biggest draft shock ever in Josh Allen. But I can't help but wonder if the team will need to shift its mentality going forward with Allen's massive contract. Taking 3 years to develop guys we have for 4 years starts to sound concerning when we absolutely need to hit on rookie contracts that give us cheap, high-quality labor for as long as they can. Drafting the sure thing might not give us a Josh Allen, but maybe it gets us a more starter-ready talent for a longer time of their contract. I apologize for the length of timing of this question since we're nowhere near draft time, but I appreciate you reading this, and as always, go Bills." So, the first thing is I think that this is a valuable question because the Bills do have a type with Tremaine Edmonds, with Al Oliver, with Josh Allen, with Gregory Rousseau. These are toolsy players that understandably need some time to develop. The thing that I will say is that the sure thing doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, this is the NFL.
The
there is no such thing as the sure thing.
So for me, when you see a player and they say, "Oh, it's a sure thing," usually that it correlates with someone who doesn't have a high ceiling. You see this a lot of time with backup quarterbacks, and you say, "Oh, well, his ceiling is a backup." Oh, his ceiling is a backup. Okay. So what you're saying there is he doesn't have starter level traits.
Yeah.
His ceiling is a backup. Okay. So he's immobile, doesn't have a strong arm, but he's super smart. That's what you mean. I mean, it's almost insulting when you say things like that. "Oh, well, he's the first one in, last one out. Gym rat. Coaches love him. He's basically a coach on the field. Nate, he could be a game manager." What they're saying is you don't have tools. That's what they're saying. You don't have tools, and tools give you options. So for me, I'm of the opinion that they're going to keep swinging at the fences, and you know what? That's completely okay. If they keep swinging at the fences for me, that's completely fine. I am completely good with that. Now,
take the ceiling players, damn it.
Take the ceiling
players.
Take
the high ceiling players.
Speaking of high ceiling, we have a high ceiling guest with us right now. He is part of EstablishTheRun.com. Evan Silva is here with us on Food for Thought, and he's, going to talk to us a little bit about the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, some projections. Evan, how you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going? I don't know what is up with my cam right now. It's not working well, but
hey, you know what? You look fantastic, man. You look a lot better than me. My logo it's all messed up. I got some flex on it. I need to go to the laundromat, have it cleaned, make it nice and shiny for everybody. But Evan, thanks so much for being a part of this, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on.
One of the things we were talking about that I just want to immediately start off by getting your opinion on is this Singletary and Moss thing.
Yeah.
Why is it that Zach Moss has a higher ADP than Devin Singletary? Why is he getting drafted earlier in general consensus across the NFL? Is it because he's a new shiny toy? Is it because he was banged up a little bit last year? Is it because of the goal line carries? Is there something about skill set? Why do you start to see Zach Moss getting drafted ahead of Devin Singletary?
I can't explain it. Well, I think that it stems from last year. I think that there was a sentiment, if you go back and read the beat writers, and you kind of use some intuition that Zach Moss, the way that he's built, the way that he runs, and that he was billed as being like a bigger back that could catch passes, that he was built to be maybe the lead back. The coaching staff wanted him to assert himself as the lead back, and whereas Devin Singletary, he's like, I don't even know if he's 200 pounds. He's smaller, and he would fit better as the change of pace back. And he didn't have the greatest camp last year. Now, and I think that when they were both healthy last year, I think that the coaching staff did side a little bit with Zach Moss. But I mean, the gears have changed, especially over the past 2 weeks. The rhetoric coming from the coaching staff, coming from the beat writers, watching the players play in the preseason. I mean, it looks like to me like Devin Singletary is the clear lead back. In the third and final preseason game, Josh Allen played 33 snaps. Devin Singletary got the whole first quarter with the ones.
That's right.
So I guess people just aren't paying attention. Maybe they bought the magazine at the start of camp, and which can't account for any of the changes. They're bringing that to their draft. Like, they're doing it wrong. Devin Singletary looks like the lead back to me.
Evan, what do you make of their decision to bring in, I think, an actual true change of pace back in Matt Breida, who brings a skill set that I know Brandon Beane talked about, which is a guy that can take the top off a defense, can be your home run threat. Are you buying? And essentially, we started this podcast talking, okay, this team is keeping 4 running backs, 5 if you count Reggie Gilliam as the fullback, quote unquote. But he's sort of the X factor. He's going to play tight end. He's going to play H-back. He's going to play a lot of positions. What do you make of how you figure out a way to essentially keep 4 running backs in today's NFL, knowing you've got to sit 5 guys in the 53? Is Matt Breida going to poach carries, or are you of the mind that each and every week it's a hierarchy of Singletary, Moss, whatever combination you want to go with there, and then Matt Breida is not really taking those carries, but is a guy that might complementary have 4 to 5 touches a game manufactured for
him? I think that they're going for explosiveness. They're going for explosive runs. And Matt Breida has always been, I mean, like, you look at like the spark testing when he came out of college, he wasn't drafted, I don't believe, but he was like at the top of the spark ratings. He is like, when he can get the ball in space, he can be electrifying. And Devin Singletary is like, a quick darting back. And Zach Moss has moved to, he's more of a grinder, and he's moved toward the back of the depth chart. So I think that, yeah, Matt Breida is going to be that change of pace. Carrying that many running backs is, it's a lot, but none of these guys have shown the capability of being like a 25 touch per game workhorse. So they're going to carry more guys just in case, someone goes down. And they're also a team that realizes, what did they give Matt Breida? I mean, it wasn't much above the minimum.
Yeah.
Singletary was like a third rounder. Zach Moss was a third rounder. They haven't invested a lot in the running back position. I think that's smart, especially considering the way that they're going to play, because they're going to throw the shit out of the ball. Okay. I heard at the start of camp, and they were number one in situation neutral pass rate across the entire NFL last year. I heard at the start of camp that they were going to throw the ball more this year. And it looks like they are. Because Josh Allen, when he was out there with the ones, the first 18 snaps, he threw the ball or dropped back to pass on 17 of them.
Yeah.
So and all the guys are at least competent pass catchers. All the RBs are competent pass catchers. There's no stone-handed RBs with any of these guys. So they fit, and they're just all going to work in tandem. I think it's fine.
If the Bills really are going to throw the crap out of the ball, which we all kind of want them to do, when you have a $250 million quarterback, you kind of want to make sure that he gets out there and loosens up his arm a little bit like the way that the Play 60 kid did and took Cam Newton's job. Of course, now we know that Play 60 kid
is actually Mac
Jones. Yeah. So that of course is a crazy spoiler. Like I didn't know that M. Night Shyamalan was actually the director of the Play 60 commercial. How about that twist? So if the Bills really are going to throw the crap out of the ball, then there are two passing targets that Josh Allen has who pretty much have their roles set. Stephon Diggs is the number one, is the alpha, is going to lead the team in targets. And then Cole Beasley is the starting slot receiver. But there is some consternation a little bit around the wide receiver 2 spot and the wide receiver 4 spot, because you have two players who can play on the outside in Emmanuel Sanders and Gabriel Davis, who kind of are jockeying for position here. Gabriel Davis was a hot name as potentially being a dynasty keeper and a hold player after John Brown got cut. And they thought, okay, Gabriel Davis, who the analytics community was a big fan of this particular last year, is slotted into a number 2 receiver role in an offense that's going to throw the ball bajillion times. But then all of a sudden, Emmanuel Sanders comes in. And Emmanuel Sanders, who has had his production a little bit neutered over the last couple of years by getting thrown to by some less than stellar quarterback play. So because of that, and because of the fact that Brandon Beane has been after Emmanuel Sanders for years, now all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, maybe he's slotted in a wide receiver too. But then Gabriel Davis comes out, has a really good preseason, and you're like, I don't know what to make sense of this. Is it really as simple as vet going out and John Brown, vet coming in, Emmanuel Sanders, and then Gabriel Davis is going to be wide receiver 4, but the Bills are going to run the second most 10 personnel in the league next to the Arizona Cardinals? It's going to be okay? Or can I really find room for Gabriel Davis in a year-long fantasy league and be okay with that if he's wide receiver 4 for the Bills?
No, I think you're going to need, someone to go down ahead of him, and it could be Gabriel Day or Cole Beasley. Not being vaccinated. That could come into play. The Bills, I'm sure, are very, very aware of that. Stephon Diggs was healthy, about as healthy as you could get last year, but he had a history of soft tissue injuries in Minnesota. Emmanuel Sanders, what is he, 35 now? He tore his Achilles a couple years ago. He should be back near 100%, or at least, as 100% as any 35-year-old in the NFL could get. At this point, I think he was a rock solid pickup for them. Apparently he's had a really strong camp. But he's well into his 30s. So, I think that you need 4 good ones. Especially with how they're going to play. But I do think that, Gabriel Davis in this 4th receiver spot technically is probably not going to get enough snaps to be a reliable fantasy contributor unless he just scores a boatload of touchdowns. which he could, because he does have the best size and red zone profile among the top four, and they don't really have a big time receiving tight end. I know that there's been some buzz around Dawson Knox, but he's really never been a producer, passing game producer. You even go back to his college career, he had 18 career catches and 0 touchdowns. So they need all four. And at some point, I do think Gabriel Davis is going to be a fantasy factor. But going into the season, I mean, I do a top 150. He's not in the top 150. He's like in the top 175 though, but he's not in the top 150.
Joining us here on our Thrive Fantasy guest hotline, Evan Silva of Establish the Run. And Evan, I want to ask you, because here's what the cool kids have to say about this Bills offense: regression. It's the word I keep hearing about this Bills offense, in particular about Josh Allen. If you're a believer that this offense is in line for some level of regression, what does that regression look like? Or are you not buying that? Or are you not taking that pill? You're taking the other pill that maybe Emmanuel Sanders makes this offense a little bit more dynamic. Maybe this is an offense that sees more zone coverage, has more experience beating zone coverage, and they're going to be a team that really, from a defensive coordinator, from a defensive game plan perspective, becomes that much more difficult to defend. Like, where do you stand on this whole regression argument based around this Bills offense?
I'm not buying it. And I think that's that the analytical approach would be to expect regression. Josh Allen played above his head last year, but I think that if you zoom out and you look at the continuity that the Bills have maintained, be it from Brian Daboll, who the NFL screwed up, allowing the rest of the NFL screwed up, allowing him to stay in offensive coordinator ranks. Like, they messed that up. I know that because he was in the playoffs, it was harder to do the interview thing with him, but you can still make it happen, and they didn't.
Evan, Joe Judge is a
I
head
was
coach.
just going to say that.
Vic Fangio is a head coach. It's wild.
Exactly. You stole the words right out of my mouth. I was going to be like, this is a league with Joe Judge as a head coach, and Brian Daboll is not. But I mean, it sounds like Daboll doesn't care too much. Eventually, he's going to want to become an NFL head coach. But I think he's excited to run it back. It sounds like he's excited to run it back with Josh Allen. And Josh Allen he's improved every year that he got in the NFL since he entered the NFL. Again, they're bringing back everybody, and continuity and knowing, where your buddy is going to be and being on the same page. And I mean, that counts for a lot. And this team, with very little practice time due to the pandemic entering the season, they came out like gangbusters, and they kind of went through that little dip around midseason, but they came out of it and they finished strong. And and now they get the full off season and the full training camp. And the only guy really that moved on was John Brown, and they replaced him with another savvy veteran. Like, I don't think they're regressing. I think they're gonna crush it this year.
A lot of people might have thought, like you said, that Josh Allen played over his head in 2020. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you one person who probably didn't think that, and that was you, because you were one of the original Josh Allen for MVP people in the offseason leading up to the 2020 NFL season. You were like, hey, guys, let's grab a ticket here. And let's be honest, if Aaron Rodgers hadn't played out of his ever-living mind and had a historic season, there's a very reasonable chance that the reigning National Football League most valuable player looks really good in shorts and plays his football in Orchard Park, New York. So knowing full well that he may have played over their heads, but didn't play over your head, talk to me through a little bit about this, because you were one of the people who was initially pounding the drum for, hey, the things are setting up well for Josh Allen to have a huge season last year. So you were all in on that at the very beginning of last year. You were all in saying, hey, I'm hashtag Bills Mafia this year. We're going to get on this Josh Allen MVP train. First off, tell me what that was like, being so far removed from a lot of that.
People thought I was an idiot. Like, You know, a lot of my friends thought I was an idiot. Like, what are you talking about? You know, Josh Allen sucks. But I think that what they failed to consider was that how analytically sound it was that the Bills organization, you know, they acknowledged that Josh Allen had this problem with the deep ball. He was the worst deep ball passer in 2019. And what did they do? They went and traded for the number one deep ball receiver in the league. It doesn't get more analytical than this. And I mean, I had a big back and forth with my buddies at PFF, Eric Eager and George Cheruri about this. And I mean, I couldn't get them to come to my side. And we really had like banter all throughout the season. I had like a DM thread with them and Josh Hermsmeyer and Kevin Cole and PFF Moo. And they weren't buying it. Like they weren't buying it early in the season. And eventually they had to come around. You know, it took them about 12 weeks, but they finally came around. And I think some of them are anticipating regression ending in this year. But that move that, it was pricey. It was pricey to go get Stephon Diggs contractually in terms of, draft picks. But it was so analytically sound because of the deep ball issue. And that's what you needed to get to maximize Josh Allen because of his, his strength, his powerful arm. And you have to be able to maximize that. And you have to be able to like get a guy that can just go get the ball, go get it. If Josh Allen doesn't place it perfectly, go get it. And then eventually Josh Allen like builds trust in that guy, and Josh Allen builds trust in himself that when he does drop back to pass and unleash a deep ball, like he's going to hit it. Because I think that in his previous 2 years, he didn't always, if you watch him play, he didn't always feel comfortable in where the ball was going to go. But I think that last year with Stephon Diggs and with John Brown to some extent, and John Brown was in and out of the lineup, but if you look at the splits of the Bills' offense when John Brown was in there, when he wasn't out there, like they were a little bit better when he was in there. And then you compound that with Cole Beasley really becoming one of the best slot receivers in the league, and the just the very progressive, advanced offensive system that Brian Daboll built this around Josh Allen. You go back to even like in college. They didn't build the offense around Josh Allen. They built the offense at Wyoming around Brian Hill. Brian Hill, who's in the NFL, and he's a backup somewhere right now. But he came in with Atlanta, and I think he's in Tennessee right now. But I mean, he was getting at Wyoming. He was getting 300 plus carries, and Josh Allen was like almost like a game manager.
Yeah.
There. And so, but finally, like Brian Daboll builds the offense around Josh Allen. Just everything came together, and they were a team that had a lot of continuity going into last year where, teams didn't get practice time. There were no preseason games. There were no OTAs, nothing, and that continuity, it's just everything went right. And I think that everything is still going right. So I don't see the regression. And again, I'm not betting the Josh Allen MVP this year because the odds just aren't that great. But it was nice to have him at 50 and 60 to 1 last year.
Yeah, you'd feel pretty good. By like week 15, 16, you're like, I might clean up here a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Evan, before I let you go, I've got to ask you, you sort of alluded to the success without the reps, right? And watching this team have the success, particularly the chemistry between Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, it almost felt a can was popped open and that chemistry was it was oozing. It was very visible from the first game of the season until the playoffs, until you saw what a hampered, injured Stephon Diggs in that Kansas City game does to this offense's ceiling. I'll ask you this with the idea that it would be hard to top Stephon Diggs' core statistics from last year. But do you believe that there's a level of hashtag just scratching the surface with the chemistry between Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and adding Emmanuel Sanders? I think it's a safe bet to say that equals some sort of volume shift somewhere in this offense to maybe being some more volume to Emmanuel Sanders. But I got to think that volume isn't coming from Stephon Diggs' workload.
Right.
And would you bet that maybe there's not quite the ceiling that we saw between the chemistry and Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs? Is there more there, essentially, with those two heading into the season? Even though I don't know how much more.
You're asking for a lot.
There's an 18th week. There's an 18th week now.
That's true.
Just saying.
That's true.
Just saying.
I mean, he did lead the NFL in receptions and receiving yards. So I don't know. He could score more touchdowns. I think that, just from a team standpoint, what I think you're looking for is, can the defense be a little – I mean, the defense had kind of carried them for a couple years there. And, they didn't really have a pass rush last year. They still got some questions in the secondary. Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano put together, full seasons of health, and can Tremaine Edmonds become the superstar that he has the potential to be? I think that's what we're looking for. If we can make the team better. I think that if they produce offensively as well as they did last year, maybe they avoid that midseason lull that they had, and things are.
That's where, by the way, Evan, that's where I see them. If there's going to be more volume statistics, they had that week against the Jets where they had 6 field goals and no touchdowns. They have that game against the Patriots where they score 7 points offensively and really just did not have the answers against Bill Belichick in that game. Mm-hmm. Like, there was a 2 or 3 week stretch where they scored 1 touchdown, and this is an offense that broke franchise records. So, like, if they get rid of that lull, maybe this is where we find that volume, right?
Yeah. If they're a little bit more consistent over the course of the season. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the defense, and, with Gregory Rousseau and, with the other rookie that they got, can they produce some pass rush, and can those linebackers stay healthy and take the next step? And then I think they'll become a more complete team.
Evan, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, man.
I really appreciate it. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and what you're up to at Establish the Run?
Yeah, just if you're a serious fantasy player, come check us out. If you're into sports betting props, we're going to absolutely crush in the prop market this year, and we're going to have a ton out each week. Adam Levitan already has 60 season-long props to bet, and we'll have a ton for week 1. We're already looking at the Dallas-Tampa Bay game, and we're going to post some of those. Because those just came out on DraftKings. But if you're looking to win some money, come check us out at Establish the Run, establishtheRun.com.
And by the way, Bruce, our man Michael Leone, who is their director of analytics, big Buffalo Bills guy here locally in Buffalo. If Buffalo people don't have a reason,
another reformed Josh Allen skeptic.
Yes, he is. Thank you for reminding me, Evan. How could I forget my man Michael Leone, who is in my mentions far too much on the other side of the fence. No, but seriously, Evan, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. Thank you so much for making time for us here at Food for Thought. This was an enlightening experience. We really appreciate the fact you made some time on your Friday night for us, man.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, guys. Go Bills.
Appreciate it. Go Bills.
And that was Evan Silva from Establish the Run on the Thrive Fantasy Hotline here on Food for Thought. Come prop up on Thrive Fantasy this football season. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports and esports app for player props. With Thrive, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Choose 10 out of the 20 available player props to build your lineup. Each prop is assigned a fantasy value for both the over and the under based on how likely it is to hit. Hit the most props and rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. Thrive has over $140,000 guaranteed in prizes for NFL Week 1 and has awarded over $4 million so far. Thrive's featured $100,000 guaranteed contest is $20 to enter, and first place takes home $20,000. Use promo code BUFFBILLS when you sign up today, and you will receive a 100% instant first deposit match up to $100.
Hard to beat that. Hard to beat that, by the way.
Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or Play Store, or by visiting their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and prop up today.
Listen, obviously Thrive Fantasy is a new sponsor of the show. I've got to say this, Bruce. I walked through the platform last week. I put in $100 in the platform. they matched my $100, meaning I now have $200 to place in prop bets. If you like DFS, if you're a daily fantasy guy or gal, I am that. I said this, and I was not kidding when I was talking to him. I'm a slut for prop bets. I love prop bets. If you are a prop better, if you like to bet on whether or not a running back hits over 100 yards, under 100 yards, and you like daily fantasy, this is the perfect mashup of prop bets and daily fantasy together. It is a platform on daily fantasy unlike any I've seen. The only reason I brought them on as a sponsor here is because I believe that they're kind of the next phase of DFS, daily fantasy sports, as the NFL continues to add and layer on, the fantasy and the betting world into one sort of overarching world here in the NFL. It's where the revenue is going to start to be generated for salary caps to go up. It's betting. I'm just telling you, go take a look. Thrive Fantasy. Go to thrivefantasy.com. Go check out their platform. At least check it out. You don't have to put money into it, but at least go check it out. Especially if you're a big DFS guy or gal, it's worth a check out. I was blown away when I saw the platform. So go check it out. They're up and coming, and there's a lot of money to be made.
Maybe you and I can have some fun contests with each other and also with our listeners.
I'd be into that. I would like anyone in this comment section to think that they're better at daily fantasy than me, much less prop betting. So if anyone in here thinks that they're going to beat you and I head to head, that's fine. But you're not going to beat me head to head in any sort of fantasy situation, except if you're in our dynasty league and maybe you're Bruce, you might beat
Maybe I might beat you in dynasty league. I also think I'm going to beat you in the bet in regards to who is going to be inactive more, Matt Breida or the combo of Devin Singletary and Zach Moss.
did see, by the way, someone in the comment section did make a comment about what a good steak would be, and not STEAK, but STAKE. And in that steak, I saw somebody say, somebody gets a lobster dinner. Who the winner, the loser has to buy the winner a lobster dinner. And listen, Bruce, anytime I get you in Buffalo, I'm happy about that. So I would love nothing more to get you to Buffalo and buy me a lobster.
Consider this a digital handshake. Whichever, at the end of the year, digital handshake, you can't see me. You're just going to have to trust that I'm doing it at this point and not having my fingers crossed behind my back like an adolescent. But also because, this is a fairly cut and dry bet that we're having right now.
It's easy.
Which is, we just count up the number of inactives Matt Breida has and then the total number of inactives between Moss and Singletary. Now, I would specify it has to be a healthy scratch. Would you agree?
Yes.
Healthy scratch. Healthy scratches between Breida, healthy scratches Devin Singletary and Moss. I say Breida will have more. You say Devin Singletary and Zach Moss will have more. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the dessert phase of Food for Thought. So hit us with the questions, the comments, the takes in the comment section. Reminder that YouTube Super Chats get priority. I'm going to go to the mailbag while we were waiting. Jamie sent me an email and said, after listening to your new show, he's a Food for Thought listener. This may be more suitable for the new show. Imagine that. But I'll let you decide. I decided it's suitable.
Okay.
Anyways, after the Bills have brought back the white face guard to universal acclaim, it is beautiful. And after the Bears games, people are pounding the tables to have a full-time fullback on the roster in Reggie Gilliam. What fads would you like to see brought back into American football, whether it be positions, formations, kits, something in the game day experience, anything at all? Now, before I get to that, EB brings up a great point. What if Breida gets released? If Breida gets released, I win.
Yeah,
because by definition, he's going to be happening more.
It's not happening, EB, so don't even worry about it. Can I tell you what fad I want to see? Can I tell you what I want to see happen?
Yes.
Fullback screen.
Fullback screens, baby.
Bring them back. Fullback screens. Outside of that, I would like to see maybe one. If Brian Dable pulled this out, just a quick Navy wing tee triple option. Reggie Gilliam, hand in the dirt, 3 yards behind Josh Allen. I want to see ride and decide, baby. Ride and decide. Pitch off to Breida. Pitch up. Ride and decide. Ride and decide.
Ironically enough, one of the ways that we have been discussing this offseason about being able to take advantage of the edges of the defense that we were not able to do is
triple option does
by
that,
getting
baby.
Matt Breida. Well, if you get the triple option, you're able to hold some defenders inside before the pitch. That is technically one way to utilize the speed of Matt Breida to be able to get the edge on the defense. One thing I want to see come back is something that's only been gone for a few seconds, and it's taunting. I would like taunting to come back. I miss it already. Roger Goodell and the competition committee have decided to usurp me of the joy that comes from any sort of reasonable emotion in the game. I'm not saying I want to go overboard. I don't want Randy Moss fake mooning the crowd
or
at Lambeau.
Who was it? Was it T.O. that lifted his leg up like he was peeing on a like he was a dog peeing on a fire hydrant? Or was that also Randy Moss?
I think it might have been Randy Moss, or Joe Horn was the guy with the phone, right?
Yeah, he was the one with the Sharpie and the phone. Yeah.
So for me, I understand that we don't want it to be openly abrasive. I understand.
Sure,
that. But football is an emotional game, and sometimes at the end of a particular play,
if you run over someone
of energy,
yes, you should be able to flex if you run over a grown man playing in the NFL. If you can't do that.
Yeah, Patton in the comments right now saying, why so serious? Stevie Johnson is turning over in his bed right now.
Yes.
He's sleeping because he goes to bed at a reasonable time on a Friday night.
Reasonable
like a normal adult.
Yeah.
And his ears are burning right now going, why so serious? He's perking up and turning into a guy who will create copies of himself to rob a bank. That is where Stevie Johnson's at right now.
Bruce, I will say this, though, and I don't know if you know this about me, but if the Bills do flash a little triple option, there's going to be no more qualified person to break that film down than me, a former high school triple option quarterback. Ride and decide, baby. Ride and decide. As I actually miss saying it. I might put it in my Twitter bio, ride and decide. But that might be very suggestive. I'm not sure I should do that.
Welcome to Food for Thought, where we ride and decide every single Friday night.
Keying up, defensive end, little 10 Vic, little 12 Veer, little 14 Veer. What do we got, fellas? What do we got?
For those of you listening in podcast form, Nate is having far too much fun with his pantomimed handoff right now. Brian in the comments section had a take for us, and it was Davis's stats will exceed Emmanuel Sanders. Nathan is still doing his pantomime triple option handoff right now.
I'm staying on the midline.
You know, there's a lot of commonalities between triple option and MMA. You know, staying on the midline, being able to get off the line. There's a lot of terminology that carries over. So what do you think? Davis's stats will exceed Sanders. I think if both of them are healthy, I'm not willing to go there.
It's hard to bet against Emmanuel Sanders. I think for the most part, people have written off Emmanuel Sanders. We heard Evan Silva not write him off, but talk almost at length about the age and the health of his career. We know this is a player in his mid-30s coming off of not last year or 2 years ago, but coming off of a torn Achilles tendon. That's not something that we see players sort of build their careers off of. You mentioned it, Bruce. This is not a knock at Drew Brees. Drew Brees is a first ballot Hall of Famer. The player that we saw Drew Brees be over the last 3 seasons, shell of himself. I think if Emmanuel Sanders has Jameis Winston playing quarterback last year, he's that team's number 1 wide receiver when Michael Thomas is out, right? I mean, that is the team's number 1 wide receiver. So I think we're more than likely underselling the role that Emmanuel Sanders can play. I'm not willing to get to Gabriel Davis sort of outgaining or out-statisticking Emmanuel Sanders, but I think there's a good chance. Maybe not a good chance. I also think maybe we're underselling Gabriel Davis just a tad here. It's hard to know, guys, but I've got to say this is a team that's probably going to have 300, 320, 350 targets to the wide receiver position. Plenty of targets to go around. Am I being conservative at 320, 350?
Maybe a little bit. I mean,
I'm saying targets, not receptions. I'm saying targets. I might be a little conservative there.
I mean, Stephon Diggs is going to get at least 150. That's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be funneled through him. Relieved Bigfoot says, not sure if this makes sense, but who is the least significant player who, if they get hurt, the season is over? Like, obviously, an Allen injury will end Super Bowl hopes, but who else's injury would mean no Super Bowl hopes? Okay, I'm going to say this right now. I don't think there is a single individual player on the team, aside from Josh Allen, who, if they get hurt, the season is over. However, I will say that when I look at players like Stephon Diggs and Tre'Davious White, if the two of them get hurt, you're now playing on super hard mode, because winning a Super Bowl is hard mode to begin with. One of the things we need to talk about as we end up with a team that is consistently good, if the Bills were to make it to an AFC championship game this year and somehow lose to another team, then the narrative will start to go. Last year, if you remember correctly, I was preparing myself for the narrative that if the Bills would be one and done in the playoffs, then is Sean McDermott Marvin Lewis? Now, I was prepared. I was totally prepared to have to combat that narrative. Thankfully, they won 2 playoff games. I didn't have to do that. But one of the things I'm preparing myself for now is if the Bills go to the AFC championship game and get bounced, now is Sean McDermott Andy Reid with the Eagles? Because this stuff is coming. I can see these narratives coming like they are glitches in the Matrix. I can literally see them. And for me, I think that we need to understand that winning a Super Bowl is really, really, really hard and is partially luck-based.
Yes,
it just is.
A lot of it's luck-based.
The best team does not always win the Super Bowl. That's just not the way it happens. So for me, when I say, okay, the season's over, probably just Allen as far as that goes.
Agreed.
But,
Season's over, it's just Allen. But Super Bowl, Trey White.
Yeah.
If you lose Trey White, you're not winning a Super Bowl. You're just not. Is the season over? No. Josh Allen could put up 45 points a game and you could win games 40, 45, 30, something along those lines. But you lose Trey White, I think you can kiss your Super Bowl aspirations goodbye.
I think you're right. I think that the idea that we just talked about Levi Wallace being a serviceable but upgradable number 2, he's not a serviceable number 1. That's the gap.
That's right.
That exists between Trey White. And a lot of what you don't appreciate about Trey White is what's between the ears. Some of his biggest plays came off of breaking off of his zone and making a play. The Chargers game comes immediately to mind. We've seen him. There's a reason why the Bills are very comfortable running as much cover 3 as they do, and that's because Tre'Davious White is really, really good in cover 3 and quarters of understanding what type of routes are developing in front of him. And mind you, what type of routes are developing behind him. Tre'Davious White against the Chargers is a great example of him being able to recognize things that are happening behind his back.
Yeah.
And that is something that you absolutely cannot undersell. The ability to understand where he's seen this kind of stuff before, understand the depth that he needs to get to be able to bait a quarterback into making a throw they don't want to make, but also being able to be deep enough to be able to make a play on the ball. Nate, we did it. Another episode up, another episode down. How you feeling, dude? How'd you feel about this episode? I felt pretty good.
I felt good. It was good to introduce Thrive Fantasy as our new sponsor for our guest hotline each and every week. So we're looking forward to telling you more about that as the weeks go on. Evan Silva crushed it. I'm a big Evan Silva fan, so having him on, getting to talk a little fantasy outlook, getting to hear sort of his insights on the upcoming season and sort of what he believes this Bills offense looks like. Shame on us, poo on us. He even sort of was trying to hint towards us like, hey, you guys going to talk any defense here? You guys going to ask me any defensive questions? And here we are just hogging the microphone talking about the offense. But listen, offense is sexy. That's the way it goes. Great episode, Bruce. As always, enjoy hanging out with you, man, on this beautiful Friday night. And even better to have Evan Silva as our guest this week.
I think it was very fitting that we had someone in the comment section who said that we need to establish a run game right when we had Evan Silva from Establish the Run here.
Love that.
Lone Wolf, I really appreciate that. For those of you in the comments listening around the world, listening to this as a podcast the next day it drops, thank you for joining us here at Food for Thought, and we hope you didn't leave hungry.